Yeah, we're live with Bob and Missy and Stuart and Catherine. I'm sure Lindsay will be along in a second. Ivier, and all the regulars, and hopefully some guests as well. Welcome everybody to our book study group. John Lavenia here with you. It's Monday, the 24th of January, 2022. And tonight we're covering chapters 10, 11, 12. Is that the chapters we just read? Yes. 10, 11, 12 from The Law and the Promise from Neville. And the chapters were Things Which Do Not Appear. I immediately thought of Missy when I saw the title of that chapter. Yep. And the Potter, which I thought was an interesting interpretation, and Attitudes, which I think had a lot to do with how we imagine other people, and not just so much about ourselves, but how we imagine other people as well. So I mean, I got some great stuff out of these chapters, and despite the fact that, at least in my opinion, it's a fact that my opinion is a bit of repetition in this book, right? It's just about the imagination, being an imaginist, and living in the end. Okay, so despite the repetitious nature of that, he keeps hitting this from all these different angles, and I really appreciate, like, it's seeping in at this point, right? I don't think anybody can get through, and we haven't been through all 15 chapters yet, but I don't think anybody can get through all 15 chapters of this book and not get the message, right? So let's open it up. What were some highlights for you guys as we went through these 3 chapters this week? Come on down.
It's just cooperation with God. That's what it is. And I even wrote it up on my phone. Such causal activity could be defined as an imaginal assemblage of images which, occurring some physical event, invariably takes place, but you must call it into existence by being in the end the wish fulfilled. And he does quote Romans, and I said, Bob, is this right? And he said, yes. It's cooperating. It's been misunderstood over the centuries. And although in my Catholic opinion, Neville God is a little mixed up religiously, but he still understands the tools that God gave us. And if the world would just live by this, and I'm guilty of not living by it myself, but this should be required reading in every home in America, in the world. And the world would be a much better place. I mean, we have to live from that place. The examples in these chapters are just, and one of them we can check. I know Virginia wasn't too thrilled, like the one lady with the artist. She talks about getting a thing, I think it was Good Housekeeping, I can't remember.
Good Housekeeping, September 1961.
Of course, he remembers the date. And some of them had more urgency. So that means they had more intensity in their imagining, and they had more stability to it, because the more intense, the more urgent, the more stability you give it. And I just can't get enough.
Wow. Okay, so we're hearing about intensity and being a co-creator. I think really what this comes down to, two things. One is getting out of your own way, so to speak, where he talks about letting it happen. So can we have, here's the question, everybody, can we have intensity, fixity of purpose, intention, right? Can we have that and not all the attachment and all of the thinkingness and of course my memory, right? Well, this is why it can't happen. Like all the stuff where we get in our own way. Can we just be in the creative flow with that?
Only with practice.
Okay, so right. So there's practice. The other thing that's coming up for me is where you said there's some conflicting ideas between perhaps the teaching of Catholicism versus where Neville's at with his interpretation of Scripture. Okay, and this is not a religious group per se, okay, but we are reading a book that cites a lot of Blake as well, but a lot of authors, including the biblical authors. And the concept that's coming up for me, which I think would make a great argument, co-creation, like Stuart put in the chat. There are many teachings which suggest or directly say that you must appeal to the higher power, God, the universe, energy. You must appeal to, and that is what doeth the work, okay, that you of your own accord you're not creative, right?
Never
And then
said
there
that.
are, excuse
We
me.
never said that.
Okay,
never
well,
said
I'm just saying, this is where a lot of people have gone, with this. God willing, I will have such and such goal accomplished. God willing, I will have, the experience or whatever. Okay. Versus here's you being cause. You are cause, which is a very pleasing thought for me, right? And this whole book, it just keeps reminding me of different approaches to accepting the responsibility of causation, where it's not like, oh, let me go pray to some outside thing that I'm not, right? So hopefully it'll do for me. No, I'm responsible. I'm cause. Okay. So there's the dichotomy. And there's even people who can mouth this stuff. Yeah, I'm going to be effective, which means I'm going to be cause, right? I'm going to be effective, God willing. All right, we're right there. There's an argument right there. God was always willing. How about you willing? You willing? Your thoughts?
That's where it falls down. We weren't willing. We want God to go do it. And there's been a misunderstanding, and he straightens it out in that part of it. I don't go to him for religion. I go to him to how to use these tools that God gave us, which he understands very well. And listen, he's a more religious man than most of the people on this planet today. He just didn't believe that God was an individual. That's okay. We're not even talking about that. We're just talking about the tools. God expects us to be the cause. We are not God. We're not the creator of the universe. And we're nothing compared to God who created the universe. But he gave us these tools. If we will just cooperate and do these things, that's all we have to do is just think. That's all we have to do. And take action, of course. But if we don't think it first, it can't come into existence.
Well, what about what he said in chapter 11? And I think Stuart's about to pick up on this. But in chapter 11, the potter, the only reason people do not believe in this identity of God and human imagination is that they are unwilling to assume the responsibility for their frightful misuse of imagination. Divine imagination has descended to the level of human imagination. That human imagination may ascend to divine imagination. So this whole idea of subordination is what's coming up for me. Stuart, your thoughts?
I'll echo what I think you were saying. And honestly, when we first started talking about doing Neville books, you and I had a private conversation about that some of the content might be offensive or blasphemous to devout religious people, because a lot of what Neville talks about, and there's even several instances in these 3 chapters where he flat out says that, God is your imagination, and shy of, there's, in my opinion, a lot of what he's saying is that the stories in the Bible are flat out metaphorical for your creative imagination being the creator. There's other things that I've read where he says that every story in the Bible is a metaphor for the male and female aspects of creation. Every story, right? And so again, whether or not we agree with that, or whether or not we can sort of look through that to see what he's trying to say. But I could see, and again, whether I agree with it or not, whatever, but I could see how people would have a problem with some of this content or some of this material, because I really do see that in some places he flat out says that what's being said in the Bible is essentially an allegory for your own creative imagination. I really did like the passage that you just quoted about divine imagination descending so that human imagination can ascend. And again, there's almost an allusion there to the Christ nature of humanity, right? The divine nature of being human is that and again, the potter analogy, or the potter reference, I looked it up. And while I have some other things to say about that, in Hebrew, potter is yatsar and yotzar. And there's 13 references to the potter. And it's considered one of the names of God, like God the potter kind of thing, throughout the Old and the New Testament. And there's a reference to it in Genesis, not necessarily to the potter, but the verb about forming in Hebrew, and how God forms Eve and Adam. And it's the same verb that's used in these other references to God the potter, right? And so, what is it, Isaiah 64 or whatever it is that he quotes, that, oh God, you are our Father, we are the clay, and you are the potter, right? And I thought that was really cool. And he makes a couple other references that that we can reform or reshape or revise, right?
Mhm.
Matter or circumstances in our lives, right? So yeah, I'm with you on that, man. And again, that was one of my concerns when we were, and again, I think we all take this however we want. Some people have a hard time swallowing, Neville, because it really is all about imagination and creating our own reality. I don't have issue with the anecdotal stuff. I think that really what Neville continues to tell us, even in these chapters, and don't you love how we all, after a while, we all just say Neville, like he's like our friend and our buddy or whatever. So,
Some
I
of
like
his
that.
books, it's just by Neville. I had to look up his last name, some years ago. Like, does this guy have a last name, or is he like Oprah or Cher?
Oh, I love it. Right.
Neville, right?
One of the things I wrote in the chat was, I don't recall ever seeing Neville encourage us to pray for anything, whereas Murphy, who was good friends with Neville and shared a mentor teacher in Abdullah, the Ethiopian rabbi, who I really believe is the source of a lot of Neville's interpretation of scripture, where Joseph Murphy encourages us to pray, and scientific prayer, right? A lot of power of your subconscious mind is about how to pray. Whereas Neville, not once in any of his books or lectures, tells us to look outside of ourselves or ask outside of ourselves for everything, that it all comes from our own creative imagination, right? Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, well, Paul said in Corinthians, essentially pray without ceasing, right? So think these things of good report, think on these things. Okay, so, and the way it's worded, I don't know that he quoted that piece here in this book, at least not yet, but the way that that's worded, things of beauty, things of good report, think on these things. To me, that would be another way of saying, live in the end, right? In other words, don't becloud your intention with counter intention. In essence, getting out of her own way, praying without ceasing. This is going to happen. The lady with the ticket, to the theater, right? She had $1. Next thing you know, she's sitting in the orchestra section because she's in the ladies' room with the other people, and the other one didn't show up. Hey, can I join you? Yeah, sure. Come on down, front and center. And so she didn't pay a lot of mind to the, well, I only have $1 in my purse. Now we're going back a few years, right? She had to use that for gas. What do you get at the gas pump now for $1? Right. But the idea that she would be there and that she visualized herself there, it came to pass. And there's so many stories like this in this book. So like you, Stuart, I'm not attached to, well, I've got this religious training or that background, or this is what, this group of people agree about, and I need to be in agreement with them. Like I've read, and I think everybody here knows, I've read from all different kinds of scripture and Bhagavad Gita and, Buddhist stuff. And we can pick different words and different languages and everything else, but getting to workability, I mean, that's what I'm interested in. Does it work? Right? Does it bear fruit? And so, because I think here's one thing we could probably all agree about, unless you've got a real like guilt drive, like you need to suffer in this life, and then, your rewards for suffering now, come later. Okay, well, if you're okay with not suffering now, and if you've got the idea that your creator, assuming you don't believe that you just sprang out of the mud or something spontaneously like a tadpole, or right, assuming that you were created, that it's your creator's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Well, how much delayed gratification, I mean, how much suffering, how about this way, how much suffering must you experience to prove like your worthiness or something? I had a lot of that growing up, and I could tell you that well, I'm sure Bob can give us some quotes, right? It's the Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom before you speak. I know, right? So before you even can voice or pray, right, or speak the intention out into the external or something, it's already known. So how much work needs to be done? This whole idea in this book is that you've already got it, right? It's just now get out of your own way. That's your prayer, right? Is living in the end.
Well, I think that's the promise.
Mhm.
And I think we'll wind up hitting some of that in the final chapters, but that is the promise, is that you have the keys to the kingdom, right? The law is kind of the technique, right? And like you, I consider myself a comparative scholar of religion and spirituality and philosophy and things like that. And that, the law is what we've been calling the law of assumption, right? You assume the state, you enter the state faithfully, you feel it real, right? That's the law. The promise is that, this is the gift to you, right? This is the gift to humanity. At least that's my interpretation of that. I wanted to go back to some people having a hard time maybe with some of the anecdotes, and are they real, are they not real? And this is what I was going to say earlier, was that Neville flat out says, and even I think it's in chapter 12, what is it? Only the indolent mind will, and I had to look up indolent, right? So it's lazy. I did, sorry. That wasn't an SAT word for me. But only the indolent mind will refuse to test the Potter hypothesis, right? That we have an obligation to test these things out for ourselves, right? And in almost every chapter in this book, he says, test it out for yourself, right? So whether or not we, whether or not the stories or the anecdotes in these chapters seem believable, unbelievable, and I'll be honest, I tend to thumb through a lot of the stories because I'm less interested in the anecdotes and more interested in the technique, right, and the method for such things. But I don't, like, it doesn't bother me if it's inaccurate, or if somebody is not being honest about their experience.
Okay. Well, you mentioned Joe Murphy before, and he talked in The Power of Your Subconscious Mind about ancient healings and the voodoo witch doctor guy and the bones of the saints, which turned out to be, just a piece of wood or something, and yet the healing occurred nonetheless. So what if everybody, we just accepted everything as verbatim truth, case closed, done, and it boosted your certainty, your confidence, your trust in the law to the point where it started working for you. Okay, fine. Oh, you know what? They missed a detail. The lady with the theater tickets, actually, there was something else. Hey, you know what? Screw it. I don't care. I don't care. It works. It works. So I once thought of an example, just thinking about like mesmerism, right? And that whole, animal magnetism, which was all nonsense anyway. But still, people experienced healings. I thought, if I could like take this doorknob, it's like the holy doorknob, man. All you got to do is like touch the doorknob, and look, if I could sell that deal to somebody, there'd be a line out my door, the holy doorknob. Right? Because people are looking for answers. I'm sorry, Stuart and I are monopolizing this conversation, but belief, right? And knowingness and certainty, right? We've talked about the certain way many times here in these talks. Well, and I don't know that there's any like straight up skeptics here with us, although if you are, that's fine. The end result of our conversations isn't that you get to agree with me or Stuart or Missy or whoever, right? The end result is that you find workability for this stuff in your own experience. Okay. But if you're skeptical, then, like Stuart just said, go do your own research on this stuff. But I'll tell you what, there are things that are pretty thin, a lot thinner than these stories that have still, the people like they latch onto it and holy doorknob, right? Here's the healing, here's the transformation. Anyway, I don't mean to monopolize this. I'm inspired though. I mean, just these 3 short chapters we just read, it's like, there's that, and that. Bob and Missy got a hot mic, and then of course the floor is open.
Let me just jump in. I think, like you just said everything that I wanted to say in the last sentence, and that is, these chapters we just read, things kind of coalesced with me. And if I can quote Virginia, good to see she's commented. I know she was here, but a couple of weeks ago, she said she wanted the Paul Harvey edition, the other side and the rest of the story. And I kind of concurred with her by saying, well, we took the example of the story that the doctor and his wife who had the vacant lot, and they wanted to build a building there, an apartment building, I believe it was. And then, they manifested that desire. Then all of a sudden, this contractor whose name that they had seen shows up in their office. He doesn't call on people call on him. And he made everything happen. And so, that was kind of a mystery to me, because the contractor had to have the desire in his mind and act on it. So who's to say there wasn't a causality between the doctor and his wife having their desire, and then, as you put it many times tonight, John, they simply got out of their own way. Okay, rather than try to make something happen, they just had faith in the desire coming true. And they lived in that end to the point where this woman who they politely despised and politely despised them showed up at the apartment and said, "This is a beautiful place you have here," which is exactly what he heard her saying. And to take a more recent example, the woman who wanted the seats front, 8th row center at the opera. Okay, her desire, she just said, "I'm going to desire this, get out of my own way, not try to force anything." She was starting to spend money that she really thought she was actually counting. Can I really afford? Can I really afford? But she got out of her own way and got herself in the right place at the right time where she could get the things she desired. And I believe the frustration that many people have is twofold. First of all, they don't get out of their own way. They feel they have to do something to advance it. And usually it's the wrong thing. Okay. And then the second is they simply don't trust enough. They don't recognize something that occurs as actually furthering their desire.
Well, if I may, Bob, not only did she get out of her own way, it took till the last possible second. She never gave up. I mean, if she hadn't gone to the ladies' room, something drove her to the ladies' room. Everything went wrong. It was the wrong price of the tickets, and So she never gave up till the ready when the guy was ready to walk out on stage, and that's when it happened. Most people give up. She could have left 3 feet from gold. But one of the most, skipping that for a minute, just two other things I wanted to say. Neville Goddard gained nothing from this. He didn't need notoriety. He didn't need fame. He never took a penny in his life. He made people money. People would say, Neville, I can't do it. I need $50,000 for this building tomorrow. He'd go sit in his chair. He'd do it for them. Has no need to tell any lies. But if you think of the story in the Bible, again, I'm jumping all over the place, of the centurion who was a pagan Roman officer, and his servant was sick. And he said, Lord, my servant is sick. And Christ said, I will come. He said, no, just say the word. And that's what's said in Mass up until this time. Say but the word and Christ was amazed. He said, I haven't found so great faith in all of Israel. And when the officer went home, he said, the palsy was healed. What time? That was the same time he was talking to Christ. It was the centurion's faith that healed, his cooperation with Christ. Now he was physically there with him, but it was his faith that did it, and he had no doubt whatsoever. But he was anxious to get home. In fact, that's how much he loved his servant, And if you just think of that story, Neville Goddard, and now I'm jumping around again. Neville Goddard was just doing a duty for mankind, because he wanted to pass these on, and thank God that he did. Let people put their tape recorders up, tape him. We wouldn't have his voice. We wouldn't have anything. He could have just sat in his beautiful Central Park West apartment, and I Dream of Jeannie, anything he wanted. And but he spent the time and rented the theaters. So I don't know how anybody could doubt this man or his motive.
And I don't think he needs to be defended, right? So whatever people, want to think after reading all these stories and his explanation of why this stuff works, again, just try it on for yourself. I can tell you what, the alternative is pretty dreadful. Thinking that you are nothing but, the effect, that you can't cause things, that you can't bring about what you want. Missy, and then again, the floor is open, everybody. We're already 28 minutes into this. But Missy has talked about the simplicity of this. We got one idea in this entire book. In fact, in multiple books, you can read other Neville books, and he goes in a couple other directions. But Awakened Imagination was, I think, the first book I ever read from Neville. But the point is that it's so simple. There's not like the 15,000 steps you need to do, or the 21 irrefutable laws, and now you got to do the gymnastics and this and that. It's so simple. Is it too simple? Perhaps, if you think you got to have, lots of complications and stuff. But again, that's what I would call being in our own way. So who else has some thoughts on these 3 chapters? Come on out, you guys. I saw Karen had a hot mic for a minute, and now she turned it off. No need to raise your hand. We got an intimate crowd here today. Just open up your microphone and then your mouth in that order. Sometimes people I'm like, you're muted. Anybody else?
Oh, hey. Can you hear?
I hear somebody. Who was that?
Can you hear me?
Hey, Karen.
Hello. I'm sorry that I was delayed today. My thought is we're used to thinking such in a linear way that it's a kind of a new concept of multidimensionality, and it's very different from what we're used to, which is linear thinking. And also I think of Neville as an angel, because what he's saying is so true. And then also he's passing on the torch of what his knowledge to the next, that's how they do it. But he's teaching us about who we are, actually, the very core of our being. And some people can't grasp that because they're still stuck in the physical world and not in the spiritual. And we have to we have to let go, and because the the spiritual world is who we are, and the physical world binds us if we're not careful, because primarily we're spirit. This is our way of thinking, I think. So once we let go and let God, then everything will fall into place. It all comes to you. We're beings, not doing. So
Wow. Karen, that's Karen's first time speaking in the group. Welcome, Karen.
what's up?
Glad you're
I have a
here.
lot to say.
Oh, there's more. Okay.
I'm not right now, but like.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll tune in again for more Karen. Good time.
Did I make sense? I don't
Of
know.
course.
Beautiful.
Well, no, you're almost exactly quoting what he said right at the beginning of chapter 10, things which do not appear. It says, it is for us to assemble here. Hold on, let me just share my screen. Hold on, so you guys can see what I see here. Hold on, un momento. Here we go. Okay. So it is for us to assemble the images of happy outcome and then keep from interfering.
That's right.
Right. The event must
Because-
not be forced, but allowed to happen.
Yes, very important, because we're just so used to doing the opposite on this earth plane that
Oh, I think we lost Karen.
Oh,
Did we
no.
lose Karen? Poof. That's what
She
happened.
went off the earth plane. Maybe she went.
Yeah, it was,
I'm sorry. I
Oh,
was
she's back.
having trouble with my internet connection.
Okay.
I forgot what I was saying. Well, I was saying something about how we interfere with everything, right?
You said we're so used to doing the opposite. That's what you said.
Yeah, we are, because like Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven is diametrically opposed to this realm. So everything on this realm is opposite of what God wants. So if we realize that, and just don't pay attention to certain things, we just need to let it be, because it's
Mhm.
it's a lot that we don't. The cause and the effect. The cause is invisible and the effect is the visible. So, but once we know all those things, then we can put everything in perspective.
Right, right. Yeah, in a previous chapter, which we went over, I think before your arrival here in the group, he talked about, if we're just treating effects, then it's kind of like just moving stuff around, move the stuff here, move stuff there. And the idea that came up for me was, chairs on a Titanic, right? Or let's move the chairs, let's rearrange that. The ship's going down anyway, right? So if we could address causes and not just put Band-Aids on effects, then, it's a lot more profound, I think. This I thought was interesting. I'm just going to go through a couple of the highlights that I had here. All imaginative men and women are forever casting forth enchantments, and all passive men and women who have no powerful imaginative lives are continually passing under the spell of their power. So this is kind of like an ultimatum. So you're either conscious and doing it, or others can do to you. And sure enough, we could see countless people, the masses, in fact, being influenced by the sometimes beneficial, often not, imaginings of others. In some cases, others who would seize up power over them. So really, it does come down to your own responsibility to work with the law, or, just whatever you get is what you get. I guess hopefully other people got your best interest in mind. And some do, but some don't, right? So there's your responsibility. It is useless to hold standards that we do not apply. Oh, I like that. I like that, right? So that smacks of integrity right there. So what was the thing? Portia. This is from Shakespeare, Merchant of Venice. I can easier teach 20 what were good to be done than be one of the 20 to follow mine own teaching. So Portia had no integrity, and she knew it. So that's pretty great. It is fatally easy to make the acceptance of the imaginal faith a substitute for living by it. Again, so this is for real, guys. Don't pay it lip service. The end result of you reading this book is not that you get to parrot or regurgitate, some lofty shit, because you think you're a philosopher now or something. Just do it, right? Moving on, the Potter. I think we already talked about this. The only reason people do not believe in this identity of God and human imagination is that they are unwilling to assume the responsibility for their frightful misuse of imagination. Also, he said here, imagination is radically creative when all imaginative activity based on memory disappears. And I think this is where Karen was going. All right. So this is, again, getting in our own way. Yeah, this is where I'm going, but here's all the other stuff that happened in the past, and here's all my reasons, here's all my counter postulates, right? So here's what I want to happen. Here's all the reasons why it probably can't, because after all, that happened yesterday. Like Bob reminded us of the couple who, but for money, would have built the apartment building on the corner of the property. And then when they took that fact out of it, well, all right, never mind money. Okay, here's what we want. Here's where we're going. Okay, now here come other people. And like that, it happened. So profound stuff, I think. I didn't highlight anything from these anecdotes, but in attitudes, here he says, we should reconstruct him with new content, visualize him as we would like him to be, rather than have him bear the burden of our memory of him. So this, of course, reminds me of something Goethe said, which I've quoted many times because it's not only made me a lot of money, but also it's enlightened a lot of people when they get it. And it's when Goethe said, if I treat you as you are, I'll make you worse. But if I treat you as though you were that which you could become, I help you become that. Again, thinking from the end, and living in the end, right? So or revising, right? So yes, I've got memory of who my daughter is, okay? And so I'll recognize her next time I see her, which as soon as we're done here, in fact, she's probably right on the other side of that door. But does that mean that I also carry with me all of the, the non-optimal things? Hey, you didn't clean your room or something. What if I revised that, right? What if I treated her, and put in anybody, right? So I'm just using one example here, but what if I revised that and experienced her imaginally as the ideal, the optimal, and forgetting, forgiving, abandoning, forsaking transgressions, non-optimal things. That takes a bit of discipline. Like Missy was saying earlier, practice, right? How do we actually do this? Well, you got to practice, just like any muscle, right?
John,
Yes.
that is just, that's why so many people go, when I go back home, I'm 12 again, because why? The parents, the family are treating that person as though they are still 12. They don't let go of that and allow the person to grow. So that will be your challenge with Trinity, but to see them in the new light. I know you said beyond that, but that's the first point. It's just to keep someone where you remember them, to keep them in your memory, rather than to allow them to grow beyond that. So that is a difficult thing to do. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, no, thank you for interjecting, right? There's a dialogue here, so thank you. Anybody else got some thoughts on any of the stuff we've just covered? Okay. So it says here, to condemn the man for having lost his way is to punish the already punished. Oh, whom should I pity if I pity not the sinner who has gone astray? Wow, that's really rich. I like that. So probably my favorite Blake quote so far. And it says here, it's not the man at his best, but the imaginist exercising the spirit of forgiveness that performs the miracle. So this may also have like a religious context in where we're looking at man at his best. If we're containing, here's man, and that's all he is man. Okay, well that's not the miracle worker there. Okay, so there's a higher power. And then we could say, and this is, I guess, where Neville's going with this, that's who you really are. Or like Karen was saying, there's spirit. I'm not, the body, right? This isn't it, right? So back to the idea, oh, somebody just blew their nose. It sounded very productive. But back to the idea that of being like a triune being, right? So there's the spirit, the mind, and the body. A triune being. That's not part of this book, but we could certainly get into it. And that's all I highlighted here from these 3 chapters. Who else? Who else hasn't talked yet? Who wants to talk? Commence talking.
Well, John,
now. Yes.
the what isn't mentioned here or said, and we have spirit, we have earth, we have whatever. Everything is energy. Absolutely everything is energy. And the grandmother who imagined her granddaughter on her lap and talked to her, and see, the granddaughter hadn't been taught yet that wasn't possible. So she received every day. She knew that her grandmother was talking to her, there with her. She was on her lap. She knew that because she hadn't been taught it wasn't possible. And all of this about spirit and body and all of that thing and imagining things and da-da-da. We haven't talked about energy. And that's like unseen, 90% unseen, and it's the biggest force ever going on. So if we imagine something, see, for me, imagination is real. It's not separate. It's not imagination here, reality there. No, imagination is real, and fantasy is real. What form it takes and how other people see it or don't see it or how it's experienced, but it's real. And energy, why can you heal across time and space? Because it's energy, and you're imagining that person, you're thinking on that person, you sending certain kinds of. You can do it inside your own body. You can do it for other people. When you see things knitting together and getting better, when you see things flowing, that helps it happen. And you're creating flow in that way. And you can help. You can be the cause. You can help healing happen. So all of these things, whether I love the grandmother, and she got heavier. She could feel her getting heavier and bigger. Now, her mind would know that the child is growing, but the child received this. The child talked to her on the phone. That's the way she knew to communicate with her.
The imaginary phone.
I think the phone that wasn't dialed in. Going back.
Okay.
But whatever it was, whether she was going hello or she was using the phone and, but she wasn't really talking to her, but she was talking to her because in her mind, she was talking to her, and that was received. That is real. And why can people read minds and things like that? Because the thought is real. The energy of it goes in. Once in a while I do it, but you're hearing it at the time it's spoken. Some people are receivers, some senders, some both, but it's there. And so imagination is how we say it. And of course, yes, if we imagine but don't believe it's possible, then we've gotten in our own way. We have put the kibosh on that which could be. But I think to say that imagination is imaginary and not real is doing a disservice to one of the biggest, greatest tools that we have. And if we give it more credence and pay more attention to it, I think it will be helpful.
Thank you. Well, it's the whole point of the book, right? Is to use this to make it real for yourself, because it's working, whether you know it or not. It's working. So Lindsay Dollar England is here with us, and she's about to give us something profound.
Well, it got me thinking when you were talking about being cause and effect, and words are powerful. But when my mom had cancer, and I know I talked to you, John, because I was like, just like, what? It was shocked. I was shocked. But my mom she never talked about it, but she said, and I'm in the South, bless your heart. We're praying for you if it's God's will. And my mom said, okay, if you're going to pray, if it's God's will for me, please don't pray for me. I don't need that. It is his will. And if that's your prayer, you're going to pray for me. She said, I don't need your pity. I don't need anything. She's polite. She's a lady, she said, I don't have the energy to combat that because it is his will for me to live and I am going to be just fine. But don't pray that for me because it is his will. But I thought that was very causative. And then I never had any, I think I was mad when I talked to you, not at you, but I didn't understand because we had that conversation, but I never lost faith. I knew she would be fine. And it was to the point, I think I was so stoic that I think even my husband said, do you even care that your mom is sick? I was like, well, you don't want to know what I told him. I was like, she's going to be fine. But if I have faith. I'm causative, I'm not even, I said, I'm not going there. And she kicked its ass and she's great. So, but it was the way she just said it with such confidence. She's like, please just, don't pray for me. I don't need that.
Mm.
I thought that was pretty bold and very causative. So, I thought that was, I know that's an extreme example, I guess, but
Yeah.
my mom's not my family, we're a bunch of giants, but she's this little petite woman and she's just, don't do that. I don't need that.
Right.
But it was very causative and it was very productive.
Well, there you go. It apparently had an impact on you, Lindsay.
Oh, huge. Yes.
Yeah, huge. That's real, right? So that knowingness on your mother's part was communicated in such a way that it had an impact on not only you, but also herself, right? That definiteness of purpose, as we've talked about before. And then following that up with faith, right? Like she apparently had, but not being, not wondering what God's will is for you, right? So that's where I think, like we talked about before, a lot of people are wondering, well, maybe, and hopefully it's for me. Man, you got to make a decision. So now balance that also with mortality. All right. So here we're doing the body thing. Well, guess what? There's 100% chance that, that thing's going to die. Okay. Just not now.
Yeah.
Okay. Right. So that's one that I've had to wrestle with a bit. Not to go down a dark road right now.
No.
But I had a dog. We loved this dog. This is before we had a daughter. Okay. So our dog was like our kid, and the dog had cancer. And here I am into all the reading and the visualization and the meditation and all this stuff, $20,000 in veterinary bills. And the dog, it didn't make it. Okay. So it didn't work. Okay. And so I'm thinking, well, is this all a bunch of bunk? I'm intending and I'm meditating. And then I had to, get with the idea that, what, this is mortality, it's part of having a body, you get, if you want to play the game that apparently we're all playing, right? This whole body thing and, earth and everything. Well, you don't get to play just part of it. You get the whole game. You get the whole thing, okay, including the mortality part. So that's how I kind of reconciled that. And so, yeah, there are, and look, again, I know I'm talking about a dead dog, okay, but maybe he was done being a dog, he's going to go do something else now. Okay, great, go do it. It was great knowing you. So anyway, I'm getting pretty far afield of what we're talking about right now.
I don't think you are, because after it was over, my mom said, well, she's a CPA. She said, I know two things, I'm going to die and pay taxes. That's her thing. But she said, I just knew I'm not through here. But she said, when it is, don't be sad, because I'll be done.
Mhm.
When I'm through here, then I'm going. But I knew I wasn't going anywhere.
Right.
And I was really thankful, of course. But I thought that was she was very matter of fact. That's just how she is. But I thought, I was very confident and certain, unwavering in that. And I think I'm not so much in other parts of my life that I'm going to make note of. So another thing I did notice, that she went through all that chemo and she never complained one time. She was grateful for everything. And she could barely hold her head up some days, but she just would smile, and that she showed gratitude the whole time, never complained.
Mm.
So I think that goes a long way too. I learned a lot of lessons from that.
Yeah, sounds like it. Sounds like it. Okay. Good stuff. Thank you, Lindsay. Let's get Stuart back out here. By the way, I'm wondering if anyone has a way to make sure that pipes never burst, because it seems like we've got an epidemic of burst pipes in our chat roll. We don't have that problem here in the South, but yeah. Anyway, Stuart.
Oh, I heard it got pretty cold down there recently.
Oh, it was like 58 degrees or something, or yeah, it's crazy. Yeah.
Wow, Lindsay, what an example of how to live your life and overcome challenges, and even an inference of not wanting to be adversely affected by other people's thoughts about you, right? If you're going to pray that, I don't want that, right? If you're going to pray that it's God's will, well, no, I don't. She rejected that concept. So I thought that was pretty powerful. So thanks for sharing that. There's a lot, I think there's just a lot of gold in these chapters. But some of the things that I really appreciate are the quotes in the beginnings of the chapters, right? And some of them are biblical quotes, and some of them are Blake quotes, and other literary pieces and things like that. The first quote from chapter 10, where he talks about, where he quotes Hebrews 11, and his translation is, what is seen was made out of things which do not appear, right? And I kind of had a little bit of a hard time wrapping my head around it. So I looked up the reference, and because again, made out of things which do not appear, it didn't quite sit with me right. And so when I looked up the actual quote from scripture, it actually opens up, by faith we understand that the universe was formed by the word of God, or by God's command. And then it goes into, so that things that are seen were not made of things. And the translations that I had read, like in the English version or the King James version, was things that are seen were not made of things that are visible. And then the Greek is, what is seen was made from things that are invisible, right? Those kind of hit me a little more powerfully. The Aramaic, how these things which are seen were from those which are not seen, right? So the creation of the universe was from things that were not visible, from things that were not seen. At least that's how I wanted to interpret that. So I thought that was pretty cool. The Herbert Hoover quote was awesome.
Yeah.
Right? About human history, governments, revolutions, wars, the rise and fall of nations could be seen as the rise and fall of ideas. Just thought that was powerful. A lot of this we've covered, so I'm just kind of going through stuff. Psalm 8, I thought was cool, where he talks about how in some interpretations, like in the King James Version, it says that man was made a little lower than the angels, right? And so since Psalms is an Old Testament book, I went and looked up the Hebrew, and it actually, Neville is absolutely correct, where it says Elohim. The Hebrew for angels is Malachim. And what's interesting is, and so Elohim is considered one of the names of God in Hebrew. But what's really fascinating, and anybody who is an ancient astronaut proponent would also appreciate that the word Elohim is in fact plural. And so it really translates to the gods, which is pretty fascinating. And that brings me right to Genesis 1:26, where the actual translation is, let us make man in our image and our likeness, right? And so again, kind of hard to swallow for a lot of people where there's a plural God. I believe in the Christian canon, they see that as the triune or the Trinity speaking to itself. Again, other people translate it as the male and female aspects of God talking to themselves. But there is this really fascinating thing about God as plural in Genesis. And then he says angels are the emotional dispositions of man, right? And are subordinate. And then he gets into the conservative and the transformative aspects of imagination. Again, I thought this is fascinating where he says the conservative use of imagination feeds off our memory, right? And in a sense perpetuates an image of that which was, and that it may not even be real because it's our imagination and it's faulty. Whereas the transformative use of imagination is that it varies a theme that is already in being, or it mentally alters the facts of nature, facts of life as we know them, right? So I choose the transformative use of imagination. And then I don't know if anybody enjoyed the analogy with diamond and graphite and the aspects of carbon, right? And being a science guy, I've always actually used that, or diamond and coal, right? So if anybody's like into superheroes, right? Remember Superman could take the lump of coal, like squeeze it and, pop out a diamond kind of thing. What I find fascinating about this diamond and graphite, or diamond and coal, is that graphite is randomly organized atoms of carbon, right? Whereas diamond is carbon crystal. And those atoms are actually organized in a crystalline matrix, right? And that's the difference between just a rock and a crystal, is that the mineral version of a rock is just sort of random, right? And through heat and pressure, for anybody who's a geology nut out there, then you get crystals, and those atoms or molecules line up in a very specific pattern, which then, turns a piece of, graphite or coal into the hardest substance known to man. I thought that was pretty cool. And then I have some questions about stuff, and I kind of wanted to pose some things to the group, because he says a couple of things that I don't know if I agree with about desire. He says desire is an awareness of something, which I agree to that point. And then he says we lack or we need in order to make life more enjoyable. I don't know if I would completely agree with that. Something that you desire comes from lack or need, right? To me, it's about a state or a circumstance you want to bring about in your life. It doesn't have to be about enjoyment, in my opinion. And then he says kind of right after that, that there is no unselfish desire, right? And so I don't know if anybody took any issue with that, but any thoughts on that?
Well, as we wrap up here, I had no issue with it. If I have a desire, well, then it's a selfish thing. It's something I'm experiencing. I'm not sharing your desire. your intention or your specific brain waves. So yes, that's something I acknowledge for myself. And look, if I didn't desire it, or if I already had it in my hand, right? So like I desire to have a phone. Okay, well, now I don't desire it anymore. Now it's in my hand. So yeah, I could see lack. I don't know. Maybe you're looking at the word lack as, in a more severe use of it. I desire to have strong forearm muscles, so I'm squeezing this thing right now. It's a guitar grip thing, grip master. So does that mean I don't already have strong forearm muscles? No, I just desire them to be stronger. Therefore, I lack the future strength that I will have if I just do this, right? So I don't know. I didn't nitpick at it too much, but I don't know if that
Yeah.
if that helps.
Yeah, I think it was, using the word lack, I tend to, maybe I just have an aversion to that. Couple other interesting things as we close up here. The guy with the $5 bill, and instead of giving the guy $5, he imagines that he gives the guy $5, right? And then he says, and then he says, on the one hand, I get it. And the guy came back and said, "Oh, I'm glad you didn't give me the $5 because I got a job and you changed my life around," or whatever. But in the passage where he talks about, imagining it, it kind of sounds like he's just doing it like so to assuage his guilt, or so he can feel better, right? To relieve his pain. So I was like, I don't know if that's the right use of imagination.
Yeah, but then the guy comes back and he's like, "Yeah, I'm glad you didn't give me the $5."
Of course.
True, it's true.
Yeah.
Right. And again, that's not a reflection on Neville. It's just an interesting story that, that this guy shared with him. Going back to this concept of, imagining people as they could be and not necessarily as they are, or as your experience of them has shown, or your memory of them has shown to be, which to me really is like, don't judge people, don't condemn. I think he says something about, don't condemn people, don't put people in a box, you aren't this, you aren't always, that one thing that you did or whatever, you're more than that. And that our memory, which I kind of just translate as our thoughts of others, either furthers or hinders them, right? And that hints at the possibility of things. He says the difference between, where he says that there is a wide difference between the will to resist an activity and the decision to change it. And it almost harkens to James Clear in Atomic Habits, where he talks about, how we, about the smoker thing, or like when you're trying to quit something, or you're trying not to do something versus, your attitude about it, and just changing it. He said something about don't make your daydreams a daymare, right? I thought that was interesting. And then the last thing I'll say, and this is kind of the end of chapter 12 here, it says nothing is more fundamental to the secret of imagining than understanding the difference between imagining and the state imagined, right? And so imagining is just almost, at that point, he's kind of talking about like fancy versus, how our imagination is keyed in intensity, right? Where one is just, I'm having a thought about something, I'm imagining something, versus actually entering that state and becoming that.
Stuart, so a couple of things back. So imagining how you can be, I know of a lot of very successful, let's say grade school teachers, et cetera, who don't say, okay, this kid is acting out, I'm going to have to, you deal with the situation, but you imagine, or you treat them in the way that they can be, what they will become, let's say by the end of your school year. And when you treat them in a certain way, they respond differently than if you treat them just as what you see in front of you. So I think that has a lot of value to not just deal with what's in front of you, but really, and we can't create people in a certain way, but just to say that I'm going to respond to you. I'm going to treat you. I'm going to be with you in a way that's your highest potential. That's going to be who you are and can be, who you can be, and people respond to that rather than being treated in I'm sorry, in a lesser way, but being treated in an expanded way. They do respond to that. So I think that part is very valid. I know, Scott, you were shaking your head no, but I've read of it and know of it. Know it can happen. I'm trying to think of a couple. I should have been writing things down. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. There were several other things you said that I wanted to respond to, but anyway, that was the one I remember.
Janet, if you don't mind, I know, John, we're running short on time here. What you just mentioned about the students reminds me of a study that was done by teachers about, and at least in the New York City schools, I know in other places, they would rotate the teachers between the A groups, the B groups, and the C groups, right? And the teachers would treat the children but they would judge the kids and treat them accordingly, even before they saw any, behavior of the children. If they were getting an A group, then, these were like the gifted kids or the ones that, were easy to deal with. And so they would go into the school year feeling good and excited. Whereas if they got the B groups or the C groups, they would have already, an aversion to, going to work and kind of have an attitude and treat the kids differently. I remember an old cartoon. It was like, the gold group will meet, in the penthouse. The silver group, will meet, on the second floor, and the brown group will meet in the basement or whatever. That kind of already, judging people. And they found that if they took kids out of the C group and put them in the A group, they would do better just by how the teacher's expectations of them were. So just to reinforce what you were saying.
Exactly. And one of the things, I'm looking at the chat, and one of the things is like, if what I'm desiring is world peace or no one being hungry, that's the only selfish part of that, is then I don't have to feel guilty or work toward that because it's taken care of. But I don't think these are selfish things.
Right.
So
you know what? I think that hits on what Murphy was telling us a lot about how we pray, and that it should be, for the good of all and to be of service. That's all I'll say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I think what Neville was saying, in fact, I pulled up the quote here, said here, there is no really unselfish desire. Even when our desire is for another, we are still seeking to gratify desire. Who experiences the gratification? You, right? So again, I don't think that was condemnatory in any way. I think he was just stating, who's responsible for your own thinking. It's you. It's your experience, right? So anyway, do turkeys fly? I'm seeing some really profound stuff. Stuart, we're going to have to wrap this up because now we're talking about flying turkeys.
All right. So I'll wrap it up by saying my truck got hit by a flock of flying turkeys. So yes, it was like frozen butterballs hitting my window.
Oh my goodness.
I had a peacock keep me from going down the road because it was going in front of me and under my wheel and whatever else, and I couldn't go forward while it was holding me prisoner.
You probably saved you from an accident.
All right. There it is. The profundities never end. No what does that say, Stuart?
No problem.
Llama. No problema. There you go. No problema.
You sent that to me. You sent that to me.
That's right. My daughter did. My daughter. That was her. She picked that. She knows you're the llama king. All right, guys, we are way off the rails now. Let's get back together again for the triumphant conclusion of Neville's Law and the Promise next week. Our next book shall be The 8 Pillars of Prosperity. Am I saying that right? Is that the title of it? The 8, yes, by James Allen. All right, so go ahead and I'll go ahead and send everybody who's on the list here a copy of that. Stuart provided me with a PDF that I can disseminate to all you peoples. In the meantime, guys, thanks for being here. Great talk tonight. Looking forward to what happens next week. We'll find out what it is when we get there. So, well, you can imagine what it is. Experience